Hi, and welcome to this webinar on moving into adulthood with paid employment. For those of you who are going to be on Twitter, you can follow this today. Latice is going to be tweeting about it, and you can follow that on @PFA_tweets. The Preparing for Adulthood program is a program which is supporting the special educational needs reforms, which is being delivered in partnership between NDTI, Council for Disabled Children, and HSA. At any point during this webinar, anybody can type any questions that they have throughout, so you just type the question and then press send. And at the very end, Carrie's going to be reading out the questions, and Jill and I will hopefully be able to answer them for you. So today, the webinar is being presented by Jill Goodwin and myself. My name is Kathy Melling, and I work as a freelance consultant and was previously the last incumbent National Employment Lead for Valuing People Now. And Jill, you are?
Hi everyone, I'm Jill Goodwin. I work part of the time for Helen Sanderson Associates, where I lead the work in personalised education, and I also do some work for Preparing for Adulthood in both the wider support programme and with the Pathfinders. During the National Getting Life programme, I also spent some time as the North West Regional Getting Life Coordinator. Okay, so today's webinar, what we're going to be speaking about is what needs to happen during transition to enable young people to move into adulthood with paid employment, raising aspirations, what needs to happen in education, post-60 opportunities and supported employment, how local areas can reflect on what's working and what's not working, and what needs to be developed, and how to ensure local employment strategies are inclusive of disabled young people.
Thank you for that, Jill. And I think really the best way to start off with a story about what is positive and possible. So I'd also like to welcome Veronica Dowell to this webinar. Veronica, do you just want to let sort of all the people who are listening about who you are?
Yeah, hi, my name's Veronica Dowell. I'm 48 years old, I live in Devon, and I have two delightful sons, Chris, who is coming up 23, I've had to think there, and I've got Rob, and he's coming up 24. Oh, Chris is 22, coming up 22, and Rob's coming up 24. I've got it wrong, I'm nervous.
That's all right, don't worry about it, Veronica, I think we all are. Now, Veronica, you can tell me a little bit about Chris, because I understand that Chris works. Can you tell me about his jobs?
Yeah. Chris is sitting here now beside us now. Chris works two jobs. He works on a Tuesday and a Friday from 12:15 at a hotel in the kitchens, and he's been doing that now since he was 17 years old. And he works at Waitrose on a Wednesday all day, still with some support, which I'm paying for, but he does get paid for both jobs.
Excellent stuff. Can you tell us a little bit about how Chris got these jobs?
Yeah, Chris was at his local secondary school, and he was at a year behind. Historically, he started late, and it was a case of I was looking at what the next step would be for school, after school, and we only had the choice of one college course. We only had the choice of one college course in our area. So we went along to the course, and I thought, well, we've covered all of this at school. What am I doing? It seemed like a holding bay, really, until the residential college. And I just wasn't comfortable with it, and nor was his classroom assistant. So I then decided to go and look around the country at the residential colleges. Chris spent 3 days at one of them, and didn't want to be there, and I really quickly realised Chris's level of need. He couldn't make a conversation with me on the phone, and I couldn't judge how he was feeling. And I was very upset with it, and they said he was quite withdrawn at the college and didn't want to mix with others. And actually, he is a quiet young man who likes mixing with people, but also likes to be at home. So at the same time, I'd already started up a private speech and language group in our area, which I was really proud of, and thought, actually, I'm delivering some really good things and I'm taking Chris away from it.
Mm-hmm.
So we came back and I made the decision that I wasn't ready to let go. My other son had just left for London. He had gone off to college, so I'd lost one son already. And I thought, what else can I do? And a friend in my Down syndrome group suggested I come along to a family-led jobs project with Anne O'Brien.
Mm-hmm.
I had never, ever thought about work. All I had been told about was benefits and how Chris could move into housing. No one had talked, and I had a meeting with school and the connections people, and everyone felt he wasn't mature enough for work, that we would need to think about courses for him. But we went along to Anne O'Brien, who started saying we could do this. And at the meeting I met Plus, which is our local employment agency, and I met a social worker from the adult team. So quickly I was able to get a little team around Chris. School released his helper to come with us. So he then was feeling, one of his helpers I mean, so he was then feeling, oh, we could do something. We went back to school, we set up a meeting just about employment, invited people along. I could tell they thought we were totally mad, but school were really backing us. So then we freed Chris 2 days a week from school to 1 day a week go to Plus employment. They had a factory unit, and then the second day he started trying work experiences with his helper from school as his worker. We continued even in the holiday sessions because I paid for his worker with direct payments.
Excellent.
And I really, really believe that people should be thinking about Saturday work for our young people, just like other children.
Yes.
And start it earlier rather than later.
Excellent. Yes. So the pictures that we're pictures that we're seeing here, Veronica, these are pictures of whilst Chris was doing work experience while still at school.
Yes, this picture here in front of us is Chris doing work experience, probably one of the first months at the hotel actually, so he was still at school at that stage, yes. And he was trying out different jobs in the hotel, but he wasn't comfortable in the restaurant. It was too busy for him.
Okay.
So this is Chris in the kitchen.
Excellent. And so how did he move on from then doing work experience to getting paid employment?
From the beginning, at the work experiences, we were talking about paid employment. We were saying that we are after paid employment. And so it was persistence, really. The job at the hotel, they felt that actually, yes, he is doing a job, and whether this is legal or not, they started paying him some hours what they felt he was worth. So, and I think that's something that the government could look at, that actually his pace was really slow, so he wouldn't get paid the 6 hours, he'll start off with 3 hours and move up. I also got the employer an award from the Down Syndrome Association about inclusion, and so I tried to big up the employers as well, so that they were getting something from it as well.
Excellent stuff.
And the co-op, so he was also working at the co-op at that time as well. So very quickly he came out of working at the Plus workshop because Chris wanted to be out there working. So we were trying 2 jobs at the same time, and he was at the co-op 1 evening a week. Because I was searching for paid work, so the co-op where he was working in the day couldn't give him pay, but then they suggested there was some vacancies coming at another one, so we tried another shop in the evening, and people really thought that Chris couldn't go after school, but he did. We walked down to the bus stop, and his helper met him, and he caught the bus to his job, and he absolutely loved it. He loved being there, but they wouldn't offer paid, so we chose to leave. Paid work. So he continued at the Rainbow, and then we had another meeting. We have regular meetings, and we had another meeting and looked at, in the area, what shops are available in our area and what shop would be easy for Chris to walk to so that he could get there independently. And Waitrose shop is the nearest supermarket to my house. So for the first time ever in his life, Chris is now walking on his own, locking my house, and for 2 years now been walking to work and home again, which is a really
fantastic.
huge stage, yes.
Fantastic news. And Veronica, can you tell me just a little bit about what impact it's been on your family having sort of Chris in employment?
I think it's totally raised our game on what Chris can achieve. And I feel he doesn't have to go off to a very expensive residential college. And whatever Chris wants, if Chris wants to, he can. And he has got friends that are doing that now, so if he feels, oh, that's what I want, then that's something we would need to look at. But I can honestly say, even down to today, a letter's come for Chris today, asking him about joining a Easter holiday club, an Easter special needs holiday club, and he just threw it at me this morning that he didn't want that. And, and that is absolutely fine. His face is on a picture also of a respite centre, and often that comes through, and he's like, I'm not going there. And I'm like, no, you don't have to go there. And he's very clear, as he sits here beside me beaming, that he's a working man.
Excellent, excellent stuff. And I understand that Chris as well cooks for you one day a week for the family.
Yes, on a Wednesday now. And he's smiling about that now. He's actually trying food that he wouldn't try if I'd cooked it. So on a Wednesday, he has a shopping list, and he buys, after work at 3 o'clock, he goes around, buys his shopping list, uses his bank card to pay, because Chris can't use money very well at all. And he comes home and using his iPad as well to follow his own recipes that he's making, he cooks us our dinner. Did you want to say something, Chris? What do you want to say? Oh, okay. And so he now cooks us tea, and he's trying recipes that he wouldn't normally taste with me.
Oh, that's excellent news. So obviously Chris working has had a huge impact on your family, and as well what you thought in terms of his future independent life.
Absolutely. And he's saving some money that, you know, we're not a family that have a big income, we're on a low income, and actually he's saving money, and we're saying to him, right, wherever you want to go, we'll save up for that sort of holiday, and at the moment it's Disneyland, and it's something that we can aim for. Also having a team around Chris, who we meet really regularly, we are discussing all parts of his life, and whatever comes up, we're sorting. So there has absolutely been lots of problems along the way, but we can nip it in the bud and sort it straight away, because we're having
excellent. That's what happens when people get good employment support. Veronica, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
No, not a problem at all. Thank you.
Excellent. And now I'm going to hand back over to Jill, who's going to tell you a little bit about the employment pathway and what gets people jobs.
Thanks, Kathy. I think that's just so brilliant to hear about how this works in real life. And I'm going to talk to you a bit about some of the things we learned during the Getting a Life programme that helps us to get to the point where young people are leaving school or college or other education and going into work. So the Getting a Life programme was primarily around young people with a learning disability, but fair to say the pathways into adulthood, and there are a number of them, the one into paid work as well, are relevant to all young people who have some additional support. So just to start us off, we should highlight that there are 5 main routes to employment as identified through the pathway, and you can see them there. And Kathy is going to talk a lot more later about internships and about supported employment. One of the things we want to look at is what needs to happen at each stage from year 9 to year 11 so that young people can get onto these routes into employment. So as you can see, we're going to put up some photos now of, there's lots of great examples of people in work. And like Chris's story that we just heard from Veronica there, we really need to be sharing these. And from an early age, these posters are actually part of the Aspirations for Life campaign. That was a campaign a year or two ago, specifically to raise employment aspirations and expectations for children and people with learning disabilities. Part of the legacy that campaign left behind is a website which has got lots of resources on there that people can use. I don't know whether you'll be able to read it there, so the website address is www.aspirationsforlife.org. And there's lots of resources there, because what we really need to be doing is raising aspirations from that early age. So for young people who are at the stage of they're preparing for adulthood, what do we need to do to make that happen? So the pathway starts at year 9, and though of course that's too early to be looking for a job, it is time to start to give really good information to young people and their families about jobs that people are already doing, and giving people clear information out about welfare benefits, and just being really clearer about that, because I think there are some myths around that, and also starting to think with them about work experience. At year 10, we're looking at work experience, thinking about options for the curriculum at school, so that takes into the account the young person's aspirations. Are the young people doing things at school which can help them to develop the skills they need for work? So this could include things like using a mobile phone, for example, travelling, or using money. This is also around the time that young people might be thinking about a part-time job. I think that when I was young, that was certainly something I did when I was still at school and at college, but an awful lot of young people that we meet through our work don't seem to have the same opportunities to think about a part-time job. Well, how invaluable that is, experience of work and some money to spend, as Veronica was just saying there with Chris in his job now, you know, having things that you can save up for as well as your day-to-day living. It's important at this age to make sure that young people and families know about how the young person can get into the route into employment that we've just mentioned. So for example, does the local area enable young people to spend an individual or personal budget on employment support? That could be one thing we might be asking. At year 11, ideally a single plan now will have been in place to support the young person on the next step into adulthood. So just to sum up what we've been talking about, we've got some headlines really. Young people and families need to know about their eligibility for funding as early as possible to help them plan, and that could include, as we've just said, individual personal budgets as part of this. We need to be starting with an expectation of work. We need to be doing that from a young age, and we need to be challenging low expectations if we come up against them. You know, we're coming from the view that, you know, everyone can work. We need to just find the right job or the right self-employment opportunity or whatever that is, and the right support to make that happen. Young people and families need really good information about what's available and what support's available in their area. And, as we just said, to see and hear other people's experiences about a whole range of options. I think in the past when we've talked about work, it's always been that we're thinking about working for other people, but that isn't the case at all. And we know some young people who are running successful businesses as self-employed. Who knows, they may go on to be employers of the future themselves. And we need to make sure work experience is good quality with real employers in real settings. And it's about support to help get young people to get a part-time, helping them to learn, not only to earn a bit of money, but to help them to learn how to be a good employee. And we need to be starting this from year 9 in terms of this pathway. To do all of this, we need to make sure that employment is firmly on the local agenda and that local areas are strategically planning for this. We're going to talk a little bit later in the webinar of a way of doing that, of how we can really take good person-centred information to inform commissioning locally.
Thank you very much for that, Jill. Again, some lovely photos of a variety of people working, and probably the one that's most sort of high profile at the moment is the big poster campaign that's going on in London. The picture in the top left-hand corner, which is a young chap who is employed through Transport for London. He works at Waterloo Station. Absolutely fantastic stuff. So we know from those posters and as well from Veronica's story that work is positive and that it is definitely possible even in these very, very difficult economic times. And it was great to hear from Veronica that young disabled people can do a good job that they enjoy and their employers very much valued. And again, evidence suggests that if we get more people into work, this would reduce their welfare dependency and also improve their health and happiness. And as well, it's really quite a big myth that if people actually go into work that they are going to be financially worse off. Yes, they may lose some of their benefits, but when people, especially when people move into work of 16 hours a week or more, people are definitely financially better off. And it's great. It was great to hear about sort of Chris saving up for his holiday to go to Disneyland. And as well, employers actually understand the business case of recruiting disabled people and having a diverse workforce. And many employers report a variety of benefits, which includes cost savings around how they do things at work, increased customer satisfaction, and also reduced staff turnover. So what exactly does the research say? The research actually clearly says, which goes back to the Getting a Life pathways, that it's very, very important to raise employment aspirations of people actually from a very sort of young age. And I know from speaking to so many families that when they have a child who is born with a disability, it's often about sort of them getting a bad news story. And really what we need to do is actually, what we need to be focusing on is what young people actually potentially could do, and making sure that we talk to young people about what they want to do when they grow up. Also what the research says in terms of what works in terms of people getting and keeping jobs is making sure that there's good person-centered transition planning in place that very much has an employment focus. So at those first transition reviews, as Jill said, at year 9, making sure that employment is firmly on the agenda for those meetings. And again, making sure that people early on get good welfare benefit advice so that they can genuinely see that people are going to be financially better off in employment. And alongside of that, making sure that people are getting good advice and guidance about the types of opportunities that are available in the local labor market, and making sure that people can test out what they think about what they may want to do when they leave school in terms of work, and trying out some and getting some really good positive work experience. And that was very clear that was very helpful with Veronica and her family, so that they could see that work was definitely going to be positive and possible for Chris. As well, it's important throughout all of that, and the research says that an underpinning vocational curriculum is very important that supports young people's aspirations, and as well that people have good supported employment from age 16 while they're still at school. And I'll be going on a little bit to tell you a little bit more about exactly what is supported employment. And as we move forward with the special educational needs and disability reforms, making sure that supported employment is part of the local offer is really going to be very, very critical. So what does good employment support actually look like? What is supported employment? It's nothing new, and it's been around for quite a while. It was originally developed in the 1970s, and it's very much based on what people know works. And it should start from around age 14, so that people have that first opportunity of supported work experience and trying out those sort of Saturday and after-school type jobs that I know that I had when I was young. And as well, it's very much about real jobs. So jobs where wages are paid at the going rate for the job with the same terms and conditions as all other employees, and ensuring that the job helps the person to meet their life goals and aspirations. And it's important to remember, especially with young people, that your first job isn't necessarily going to be your dream job, but kind of getting that first job makes sure that you gain an understanding of what work is all about. A real job is very much valued by managers and colleagues and has similar hours and times at work as other employees with safe working conditions. Fundamental to supported employment is that everyone, absolutely everyone, can work with the right job and the right support. And when looking at good employment support, often you hear about work readiness, and work readiness is not a very helpful concept. And I think that in the story that Veronica shared, that was very, very clear, because she was actually hearing that her son perhaps maybe wasn't ready for work, didn't necessarily actually have the maturity, but he actually did manage to go on to get a job. It's very difficult to define what work readiness is, and I think that individuals know within themselves about when they're ready to try out work. So in terms of supported employment, work readiness is not a helpful concept. There's a number of guiding principles that underpin good employment support. So supported employment, at the heart of it, is very much about building a partnership, building a team around an individual where they have choice and control to decide about what their career path is going to be. It's very much about full inclusion and making sure that people are going into jobs with ordinary employers. It's very much about making sure that you get that job. It's about rapid job search and then looking at training people once they are placed in employment. Supported employment, it's not just about getting that first job. It's about making sure that people are going to be developing careers. So it's very much looking at support in the long term and making sure that that partnership, that circle around the person actually continues to support that person. And that will be both the young disabled person, their family, other job coaches and support workers, and as well, most importantly, the employer. As well, it's about looking at if people actually need support at work, looking at how you can use assistive technology, but also about how you can use the natural supports and mentors that might be available in a particular workplace. So along all of these slides that we've been putting up, on the left-hand side is a diagram, I think, which kind of sort of demonstrates what the illustrates what the supported employment process looks like. And it very much, good employment support has sort of two key customers in the process. It's not just about supporting young people with disabilities, but it's also about very much about supporting and understanding employers. So it starts with the young people actually looking for work, making sure that they're engaged in the process, and going through a process of getting to know them, getting to understand their skills, abilities, and talents, and how those skills, abilities, and talents are going to be able to be used in the local labor market. And then it's very much about agreeing a plan together about how the job is actually going to be found and what sort of things you're going to be trying out. And that's going to be a plan where the young person, supported employment or job coach, and the family is very much actually working together. Alongside of that, it's around working with employers in the local labor market and making sure that they're engaged and want to be involved in the supported employment process. It's about understanding their needs and identifying vacancies and then getting to know those jobs so that what you can do is you can match people to the right job so that employers get the right worker and job seekers get the right job. But it doesn't stop there. It's about making sure that the right support is going to be in place, both for the employee now and the employer, so that they can actually make the relationship work well. And then it also doesn't go on because it's about making sure that people continue to develop their skills, remembering that your first job is not your dream job, and to make sure that people will have continued development opportunities so that they can develop a career. Jill mentioned as well about, and I mentioned, about the importance of having a good vocational curriculum. And a really good example at the moment of how a vocational curriculum can be delivered is through the new programs of study which are being introduced from September of this year. So at the moment, there's a lot of work being done on the development of supported internships. And supported internships, again, are very much based on supported employment principles. so that people are immersed or placed with employers and they learn within their internships. So for this course of study, the majority of the young person's time is going to be spent at an employer's premises. And this is very much making sure that they can be fully immersed in that workplace and understand and learn about what it's like to be at work. During a supported internship, young people are expected to comply with sort of real job conditions such as timekeeping and dress code. And people will have a job coach who provides support for them to learn on the job. And their job coaches will be using something called systematic instruction, which is a method specifically designed to help people with complex learning difficulties learn new tasks. Throughout the supported internship program, it's important to make sure that people are set stretching learning goals, that they continue with any English and math learning that they have. But once they actually learn how to do a job with a particular employer, thinking about how that job can be made more difficult so that young people continue to learn throughout the program of study. Throughout a supported internship as well, both the young person and the employer will get support through the tutor and a formally trained job coach. And as well, I suppose, very integral to supported internships is making sure that when the program of study finishes, that people continue to get support to make sure that they will get paid jobs if their host employer does not offer them a job at the end of their internship, and they will get sustainable sort of careers. I'm going to hand over to Jill now, who's going to talk to you a little bit about how areas can think about strategic planning to make sure that all of these things get in place that we've been talking about.
Thanks, Kathy. We've talked a lot about what needs to happen with individuals and how to support individuals. But we just did want to also just think about how we plan well for paid employment on a strategic level. And working together for change is a great way of doing this. As you can see there, it's a simple process for putting people who use services right at the heart of commissioning. So it's about listening to what's working for people, not working for people, and finding out what's important to them in the future, and most importantly, acting on that. So where does the information come from? How can we listen? The very foundation of working together for change is to use really good person-centered information as a starting point. And we can gather this by asking what's working, what's not working from different perspectives, as you can see on the slide there, thinking about it from all different angles. So this could be covered and gathered at a person-centered review, and we have a slide here just to show you what that might look like. So this could be gathered at a person-centered review. So what we need to do is make sure that, of course, we use that information to make sure we set action with and around individuals. But then, as you'll see from the next slide, what we need to do is then collate that so that we have learning for the local area. So what can be done with that information in terms of the individual? What's working? What do we need to do to make sure for the individual that stays working? When something's not working from the individual, what do we need to do to make that different? And what do we need to do to plan with and around the individual for things that are important for them for the future? Strategically, when we find out what's working, we want to make sure we're spreading that so that it works for more people. We need to be thinking about what we need to change in terms of things that are not working, action at that operational strategic level that you can see there. And thinking about the future, what does that teach in the local area about what we need to be developing locally in terms of the local offer, and what do we need to be commissioning also. So working together for change has 8 stages. So starting with preparing and collecting the information about what's working and what's not working. Then working together with all of the stakeholders, including young people and the families themselves. We then feed that information in some I statements. We then need to be thinking together about the root causes of what's not working and prioritise these. So we've got a really clear understanding of why things are not happening. We then need to be identifying what success would look like and planning the change that's going to be needed to bring about that success. And then obviously it's important to be implementing and regularly reviewing what we've come up with. So, as you'll see on the next slide, in terms of outcomes, the person right in the centre, young people and their families, are right at the heart of the process, so that commissioning is transparent and readily understood. To sum that up, we've just got one more slide to explain this. So to sum this up, working together for change delivers that real link between what's said by people and what providers and commissioners do in response to that. And that really is a golden thread. Okay.
Thank you very much, Jill. That's really helpful. So it's really quite important to make sure that we're not thinking about getting young disabled people into work in kind of a vacuum or a bubble, and making sure that what's happening in local areas includes all people and that we have inclusive employment strategies. So strategically, local services and organizations can work together to make sure that transition planning is linked with personalization and supported employment, so that people can very much make sure that they get good employment support from age 14. And make sure that all staff are supported to work together in order to prioritize employment and to understand the part that they can play. At the end of the day, not one single organization is responsible for getting young people jobs, and everyone does have a part to play, and it's important to make sure that everyone is working together with that end aim of making sure that young people leave education and do get jobs. It's important to make sure that roles and responsibilities are clarified so that young people and their families know who will support them to develop a clear plan, get work experience, part-time work in employment after school or college. And it's so vital to make sure that young people and their families have very, very clear information about welfare benefits, personalization, and funding for their employment support to make sure that all of these things can happen. And it's very important to make sure that local areas are commissioning services and support that lead people to get jobs, making sure that local areas commission good supported employment that can work with people whilst they're still at school into adulthood, to make sure that they not only get that first job but develop sustainable careers. So I hope we're coming to the end of the the webinar now, and what we hope to have covered in the past 3/4 of an hour or so is that we hope to have shared with you what needs to happen during transition to enable young people to move into adulthood with paid employment, and as well the importance of raising aspirations and what needs to happen in education during post-16 opportunities, and of course supported employment. And Jill's provided a good summary about how local areas can reflect on what's working and what's not working and what needs to be developed. And lastly, we covered on to look at how local areas can ensure that their employment strategies are inclusive of young disabled people. There are all of the Preparing for Adulthood contact details. Please do not hesitate to contact us. As well, we have a bi-monthly news bulletin that you can sign up to through the website, which provides lots of good information. Thank you very much for listening. I'm going to hand over to Kerry now, who's going to read out any questions that have come up during the course of us all speaking.
Thank you very much. I have some questions for you. The first question is, would it be possible for Veronica to give us times for the regular team meetings? And it says, for example, how often does she actually meet with them?
Okay, hi, it's Veronica here again. Now, at the time, we were meeting every 6 weeks unless we needed an emergency meeting, which I called everyone together. But now the pace has dropped off, actually. We're more having meetings, it's more about Chris and independence rather than work now. So we might still have a meeting every 6 weeks, but it's more over Chris gaining more skills at home. So not our work pressure is off at the moment, believe it or not. Oh, he does have a meeting at Waitrose coming up, like a yearly review like everyone else. And that's going to be a little bit of a challenge for him to do at the interview, but we've got that coming up.
Lovely, thank you. The next question is, the challenges experienced is getting employers on board to offer opportunities. How do we get employers on board to take students? Even if you offer a support worker with them, they still use excuses.
It's Veronica here again, you know, and I've been on that road. For me as a mum, I'm saying to families that don't rush it. So first off, if you do get a place in a shop or wherever, don't rush this whole experience. It might, like for Chris at Waitrose, it took 2 years for everyone to get really used to him and feel comfortable around him, maybe in the canteen and things. But I think unless we include our young people more, you know, it's not going to improve. I think councils need to be advertising more for employers and having more meetings with, just out there, getting our young people out there so that more managers are prepared to do it, really.
Yeah, I'll add a little bit to that as well. I think that, yes, it is very important to get employers on board, and that's why it's so important to have good locally commission supported employment in place. Because if you have good locally commission supported employment, that's what supported employment does. Because an employer is a clear customer in the supported employment process. And what they will do is that they will work with employers to make sure that they are engaged in the process, understand what the clear business benefits are of being involved, because it will help them to make sure that they can have a diverse workforce which better reflects their local communities. So we can, you know, by getting, you know, that there is a very, very clear business case to employers, because at the end of the day, you know, there are quite a few people with, you know, local communities include people with disabilities who are consumers in their own right, and it's important that businesses, through employing disabled people, can better reach out to those people as consumers.
It's Veronica here again, and another thing that the manager picked up on at Waitrose for Chris is Chris's beaming smile when he walks in, because he can't wait to get there, and he doesn't actually have to be there, so he wouldn't go unless he really wanted to. And they love that when he walks in the door, his beaming smile that he wants to be there.
Yes, thank you, Veronica. Jill, did you have anything else to add?
I don't think so, Kathy. I think you've covered what I was going to say.
Okay.
Thank you. The final question is, will this presentation and previous ones be made available in the near future?
At the moment, yes, you can. This presentation is available. At the moment, if Carrie, please correct me if I'm wrong, people can contact Carrie and she will send a link on YouTube for people to view the presentation and hear it again. And as well, not so, hopefully very, very soon, all of the webinars that we've done as part of Preparing for Adulthood, there will be links put up on the Preparing for Adulthood website.
That's correct, yes. Lovely. And I have just one final comment that's just come in, which is to say thank you to Chris and Veronica for sharing your experience, really helpful, and to PFA for a highly informative session.
Why, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's my first webinar, and it's been a very, very interesting experience. And we were very grateful that so many people actually did tune in to listen to what we had to say, because we're very, very passionate about making sure that young people get the right support to make sure that they can get jobs and sustainable careers.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. And sorry, just one more final comment that's just come in was, again, to say thank you. This was really, really useful.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and that's all of the questions for today.
Thank you very much.